Hello and welcome to the program. On Newsnight, we talk to some of the major stakeholders in Nigeria's journey to growth and development. I am Ladi Akeredoluwale. Thanks for joining us. On today's edition, our focus is on the education subsector. Where does it stand in terms of content and quality? Girl-child education, the almajries in northern Nigeria, quality of teachers and teaching, as well as funding. My guest is the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Benin, the Nasarawa State University, as well as the University of Lesotho in Southern Africa. He is also one of the first professors of education economics in northern Nigeria, Professor Alamo Baikie. Prof, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Sometimes you come across people, someone once told me that if you want to know the quality of growth and development in any society, go to the schools, visit the education system. Taking that as the peg, how would you assess Nigeria's education quality at this time?
Quite honestly, I'm tempted to say that there is not much to write home about in terms of the quality of education in the country today. And the sad aspect of the whole scenario is that nobody seems to care. So everything is going topsy-turvy, as they say, and you are overloaded with people who should not be teachers. And when you go to the universities, there are people who are supposed to be lecturers and who are not expected to be there, because they don't just have what it takes to be lecturers, and exam malpractices all over the place, and of course you have all these beggar situation, the almajiri situation all over the place, and there is no built-in monitoring system in the educational system as would correct mistakes, as would correct wrongdoing. It's just a housekeeping chores, so to say, without having any reference point as to what our goals are. Our goals essentially are becoming certificate-oriented, and you have to get the certificate or the result by all means. And that's what is happening. And see what is happening in the university system. And see how much we are also producing people with grades A, B, C in school certificates, which don't mean much if you come to X-ray the content of the brains of those who pose with these certificates. So there is a lot that needs to be done to bring about some sanity in the educational system that is running riot now, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, I want to nail this down a little to the northern part of the country, where, as your answer to the last question, you mentioned the almajiri. There's that. There's the general out-of-school children phenomenon.
Yes.
And then there's the issue of girl-child education.
Yes.
These are three things that are peculiar, so to speak, to the northern parts of the country. So let's take them one by one. Let's start with the almajiri.
Yes.
I remember that under the previous government led by Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, there was this policy of building schools in certain parts of the north for the purpose of these almajiri children.
Yes, yes.
Many people don't know who they are. They just hear that they are almajiris and they think that they are these beggars on the streets. But in the chair in which you're sitting, I've spoken to a couple of people who have said, well, actually, they are not street beggars. They are people who are being taught religion and culture in a setting that is not familiar to those outside of the north. Is this true?
Well, to some extent that may be true, but the whole issue of almajiri and the problems that they are posing for the country is that it's been handled haphazardly, in the sense that you don't plan anything for them, and you just talk glibly about handling or treating the issue of Almajiri. You don't even have the correct statistics of the number of them. Neither do you know where they come from, and how do you plan for that? I mean, with all due respect, the building put up by President Jonathan is well intentioned, but as things have turned out to be, it just didn't work because it wasn't planned for. It wasn't properly handled to the extent of knowing what to do with the building when they were constructed. So how do you solve the problem of Almajiri? I believe that one of the major issues that you have to do in order to have a clearer picture of what the situation is to have a correct census of this Almajiri and where they come from. If their parents are around, we know who they are. And if they are all from different local governments, send them back to the local government and design a plan that will make them remain in their local governments and do something that will be beneficial not only to the children but to the parents and to the population of that area. But as it is now, the whole thing is scattered, and we talk so much about the Almajiri children and things like that, but without doing anything in concrete terms to bring about a resolution of the problem, and the numbers are increasing.
How do we tackle that problem then?
Well, my approach to the situation, as I said earlier on, is to have first go to the urban areas, have a census of these children, and know where they come from. After knowing where they come from, you take them back to their local governments and get the local government to build what may be regarded as a school. I don't want to call it school because when you talk about school, you are talking about conventional school. But in their own case, I don't think the conventional school is what they need. They need a school system that will be structured around doing something with their hands and teaching them maybe the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, and probably Hausa, and English and Arabic, as the case may be. Of course, the religion becomes a background. But the important thing here is put them together in a place. You have time for school, time for sports, time for handwork, so that you can engage them, if you like, 24 hours. You know, there are children that are made up of different background, different ages, and they have been exposed to, if you like, city life. And going back into the back room, so to say, is not attractive to them. They prefer to remain in the city, beg, and get something. But if you want to pin them down to learn something and do something, you must make the situation more attractive than going out to beg and see the limelight. You see, we must make it more attractive than you give them school food and get them to play games round the clock, get them to do some work, learn how to make bricks, carpentry, leather work. That is an important aspect of the curriculum, not conventional school at all. And when it is time for religion, you give them the time to do the religion very seriously. Even if it is Christian religion or Quranic, Islamic, fine. You just give them time to do it. Then what they need is to pin their attention to doing the right thing. You pin their attention, and you can't pin attention by just talking about it glibly. These are children who are very restless, agitated, hungry, you know. So how do you control such people by putting them in a conventional school? You can't.
Now, does this also apply to the general phenomenon of out-of-school children? Because those ones are in the millions.
Yes.
Generally, but also particularly in the north.
Yes, definitely. That is the approach I would take also. I would take that approach very, very seriously because out-of-school children, you know, I doubt very much if you can make any dent by bringing them back to conventional school in the hope that they will go through the rudiments of conventional school. And no, you have to treat them separately. A special type of children who need special attention. We need special attention. You need people who know the psychology of these children, that can really empathize with them and then get them to be seeing the result of their efforts. You know, if he writes a simple sentence, you will see the result and you praise him for it so that he can go forward. You see, and you really need a very serious concentration of attention to deal with situations made up of children that are of different background, different ages, and different disposition.
No, but the northern governors seem to have arrived at a position where they say they're going to, or they're adopting a common policy on this issue of out-of-school children. And it is part of why they are keying, for example, into the homegrown school feeding program that the federal government has brought about, is the reason why they're talking about free education, particularly at the level of primary school. That because they found out that some of the parents, part of the reason why they don't send the children to these schools is because they say they can't afford to. In the case of one or two of the states, they've even made laws that make it an offense, a criminal offense, to find your child outside of school during times when it's supposed to be school hours, and that the parents will be held liable. Are any of these strategies or methods, are they working in any way in your view?
We are planning in a vacuum, and it will not lead to anywhere. It's good to hit the headlines and impress listeners with what your plans are, when in fact you don't have any plans. Putting the brick and mortar together does not add up to dealing with the problems. You have to have a well thought out plan that will lead to that. I mean, you put all these things together, who is to implement them? Who is to implement them? Where do you have the people to implement them? Because you didn't plan for them. You didn't plan for them in advance. So you are just planning for failure. It's as simple as that. This is not an ordinary situation that all you needed to do is to put the two together and it works. No. You have to have very serious planning made up of people who really understand the nature of the problems, and they can come up with plans leading to the solution. It's not enough to talk about it. You have to plan for it very well. You have to understand the goals you want to attain. You want to know how these children came about. Knowing how they came about is very essential in determining what to do with them. And most of us just know they are there, but we don't know how they got there. You see, you have to know how they got there in order to plan for them very well. So I don't think this issue of just talking about them is going to provide us with the right type of solution to the problem. You have to think, in fact, you have to employ the services of crack educationists who are well versed in the psychology of children and their makeup, to sit down and plan for this thing. They already know the children. They will study them and begin to plan for them. There are some issues you bring to these children that will be irrelevant to them. They don't mean anything to them. It will scare them away and they leave you with your buildings and things like that. But if you know the heartbeat of the origin of their problems, you plan to see how you can avoid the problems and have a tailor-made problem, a solution to the problems you are trying to tackle. So school feeding, with all due respect, is good. I'm not averse to that. It's just like saying, eat this so that you don't talk and complain about us anymore. That is not the issue. Do they know why they are being fed in school? Do they know the reason why they are being fed in school? Is it just to make sure that mommy doesn't suffer in trying to get food for you? No. You have to have a good picture of the problems you are trying to solve and get the children to be part of the solution to the problem.
Now, one particularly knotty issue which seems to defy solution because it has, as it is said, some cultural and religious background. That's apart from the traditional issues that are with it, is the girl-child education. In northeast Nigeria, for example, the whole idea of the insurgency and so on means that for large swathes of that part of the country, female children don't go to school. They can't, and those who venture end up like Chibok and Dapchi and a number of other less well-publicized cases. How is that to be tackled, the issue of girl-child education, generally in the North?
Well, you've just mentioned it, that is a cultural matter that unfortunately is also tied up to the religion. And when it gets to such issues, it becomes very, very sensitive. I think what needed to be done more often than not is to, those of them who have broken through the barrier and are from the same cultural background should be put forward as examples of what can be achieved if these children are taken to school. Unfortunately, most of those who end up finishing their school and becoming whatever the society gives them, isolate themselves from the problems we are trying to solve, and they are not being portrayed as examples of what can happen to this girl-child education if given the same opportunity. You see, you learn by doing, and it's not enough to while a group of us are succeeding in promoting girl-child education to the level at which they are reaching now, up to university and things like that, we are ignoring a section of the community from where we also came, from being oriented into such an idea of going to school. The girl-child education, you have to break through the cultural barrier, and you have to make sure that you also put across information that will let them know that even the religion is not a barrier to education. It complements education. Culture complements education. And this is the daughter of such and such a farmer who is today a permanent secretary or a doctor. They should, and from the same village, probably, they should be shown as an example of what they can become if the children are allowed to go to school. It's a very sensitive area, but it takes more than talking about it. It takes more than talking about it to achieve some goals. You have to do something in concrete terms that will help parents to appreciate the significance of this girl-child education.
Now, coming now more to general education. Now.
Yes.
Something that quite a number of people have pointed out is that there's a need to go back and look at the curriculum at primary, at secondary, and at tertiary levels of education. That because what the curriculum is now does not appear to fit what skills that are required
Yes.
In the labor market. What's your view? What do you make of that? What do you think should be with respect to the curriculum, education-wise now, generally, at the three tiers of education?
Well, the first national policy of education was enacted about 17 years after our independence. And it's supposed to have looked through the curriculum that is being offered at all levels, the policies and things like that. I suppose the point at which we are now calls for a relook at this policy and to see whether indeed we have enjoyed the dividends of what the earlier policy is supposed to proffer. But I think that it's good to talk about curriculum and things like that, and if you have it done. But the delivery of the contents of the curriculum is an issue, very, very important indeed. You can have a wonderful curriculum, and you find that administratively, structurally, teaching-wise, teachers and things like that are not tailor-made to suit what you have reflected in the curriculum. And you end up not doing much to make a difference from the past and the present. So it has to be holistically attacked. When you talk about curriculum, you have to think about the management of the curriculum. Those who would implement the contents of the curriculum, what will be required to make sure that the curriculum is properly implemented and things like that. So, well, yes, I agree that there may be some need to look into the curriculum, but at the same time, you cannot do that in isolation from other issues that are very, very relevant to the attainment of what the curriculum is supposed to do, like teachers.
Quality of teachers.
Quality of teachers. You see,
we seem to have, apart from a quality problem, we seem to have a shortage problem.
Absolute shortage, because we're not even, in my opinion, we're not even training teachers the way we should. We're not.
How should we train them?
Well, I mean, you see, in those days, teachers, you have them in different grades, grade 3, grade 2, and things like that, and then that phased out. I replaced them with the NCE people. In my opinion, the point at which they are phased out, it was very premature, because there was no plan, no organized plan to sort of see how you can integrate the outgoing with the incoming. And so you produce people who are essentially not primary school teachers to be primary school teachers. And those who are primary school teachers do no longer exist. So you have NCE holders who are being trained to study 2 subjects and a smattering of education and ask them to go to the primary school. What would a graduate who has taken the NCE in economics and mathematics, what is he going to teach in the primary school? You see, and he doesn't even know, and you are talking about 6-year-old plus. How is he going to handle that? So teachers are very, very crucial to some of these things, and that was what was planned before independence and after independence for teachers in this country. You have them in various shades and various grades, and they fit into the system and the curriculum that is being implemented at that time. Right now, all that we have in the form of teacher training is colleges of education. And I must say, as far as my own assessment of the situation is concerned, very few, if any, are training teachers for the primary school.
But if that's scary, as you say, because if at that level there seems to be that distance or gap, then of course it's going to have impact further down the line. Because if at the primary level, what is being imparted, if anything, is not adequate or is not what should be imparted.
Absolutely.
By the time you move on, there's going to be, those children will not be able to do the necessary add-ons that bring them up to the quality that is required as they move up the ladder to secondary and then tertiary education.
That is what has given birth to private schools. And the private schools on the other extreme are overburdening children with so much to do with a little brain. And by the time they get to somewhere, they get stuck. They get stuck.
So it's either too little or too much?
Too much. Or in some cases, nothing at all.
But then they point to the examples of countries like Japan, China, and South Korea, where children actually are also put under a great deal of pressure in terms of education. Yes. Especially earlier.
Yes, of course, you see, but look at their surroundings. Their surroundings are themselves educational institutions. because they learn from their surroundings, their environment, and their homes, and things like that. So probably the little they miss by not going to school, they see it in the home. And the parents are also oriented to guide them into doing certain things without necessarily going into the classroom situation. So that in itself has a salutary effect in the upbringing of the children. But here, there is no environment at all that will make students be on their own, our children to be on their own and learn without the guidance of ill-prepared teachers. You see, there isn't.
But does this preparation also have anything to do with funding? Because traditionally, I think it's UNESCO that says that any country that is serious about education must devote a certain percentage.
Yes, yes.
I think it's 26% or something like that of its total spending to education. Nigeria has never been able to quite achieve that target.
Of course not. We have not. And one of the issues here again has to do with over-centralization of some aspects of our education. But you cannot decentralize if you don't have the manpower that will effectively decentralize. So your manpower is very short. Look, in those days when we had regional government, we had take a wide expanse of land like the northern region. We had one Ministry of Education, one Ministry of this, one Ministry of this, one Ministry, one. And we felt the impact. We felt the impact across from Benue to Sokoto, from Ilorin to Maiduguri. We felt the impact. But they are stationed in Kaduna, and the tentacles spread. And when you hear that an inspector is coming, you know what to prepare for, to come and see you. One Ministry of Education. But now they have multiplied the ministry. The same thing I believe in the West, in the Old West and in the Old East. I believe that is so. But what is going on? In the level of the states, even as we have it now, these regions broken into states, we hardly even know or hear anything about these ministries having an impact in education in the various local governments. We don't feel it. If they are having the desired impact, we certainly would not have a situation such as the one we are faced with, whereby people run away from public schools and go to private schools. Nothing seems to be happening there.
But that brings up the issue of welfare, because part of the reason why people are running away from public schools is the issue of strikes, the instability in the academic calendar, and so on, which brings up the issue of welfare of teachers, because it's one thing to talk about their training, the quality of what they have to impart and so on, but if they are not well taken care of, then of course you still have a problem, don't you?
Of course you do, but then the issue is whether those people who are there are really teachers, or they are different being called.
So the welfare must be attached to those who are actually teachers.
Exactly, and the lack of the welfare scared the real teachers from being in teaching. So they go to customs, they go to prisons, they go to immigration with all their designed NCE certificates. They go there and they go there or look for a way of improving their educational qualification by going to the university in order to avoid going to the classroom to teach. You are avoiding it.
Some of those listening to you will wonder, I mean, the National Union of Teachers fought and got a special teacher salary scale.
Yes.
ASU at the level of the universities fought and got a special consolidated salary scale for university lecturers. So when you talk of welfare, do they really still have a valid point with all these special schemes carved out for them?
Well, to have welfare is one thing, and to channel the resources arising from that is another thing. And by channeling, I'm saying that the educational system needs to be needs a grandmother that will always look after it. In spite of the money you get, you see, you can spend it carelessly and you don't get anything out of it because you don't have the checks and balances that will make you be productive and get your children to become well educated. So the aspect of supervising schools, getting them to do the right thing, it's just not there. I've just been working on some papers recently, and I went to the archives and I discovered a lot of things about school inspection that were carried out pre-independence by the colonial masters. Incredible. It's just incredible. Whether you will like it or not, I will say it here and now that those people worked hard. They worked hard. They were in every nook and corner of the school and that is why today we have a background of people who are the product of that system that are now old and retired. No good people to replace them. You see, no good people because they are not. We just live these things in the wilderness, and nobody is there to put them in the correct path that will make them have the benefit of good education, because you do what you do because nobody will come to look at what you are doing and chastise you for doing the wrong thing.
So again, it comes back to both inspecting and supervision,
yes.
monitoring.
Yes.
Where did we go wrong with that? Because if you say pre-independence and maybe in the immediate aftermath of independence,
yes.
this was very strong.
Very strong.
Is it because we attempted to decentralize it? Because you talk about the North, one ministry, vast area,
yes.
and yet the impact was felt right across.
Yes.
One would have thought that when that was reduced to the level of states and the power was devolved down for these purposes, the impact should have been felt even more across. But that doesn't seem to have been the case.
No.
So where did we lose it?
Well, you see, orientation. The orientation of those in the position of authority is different. And people begin to look at some of these responsibilities in terms of Naira and Kobo. And secondly, most of them don't have the wherewithal to carry out some of these functions. And there is no source from which you can bring them up. Then the mentoring system ceases to exist. You don't have people under whom you work because people don't want to work under people anymore. You know, they feel they know more than is necessary, so why am I going to be mentored? They don't. And those of them who are working are hardly found in the office to work, you see. And then there is no sort of stabilized system of having in-service training and orientation to those who are on the ground to make them get to know new things in education in the light of the problems that are becoming prevalent in the system, in the Nigerian system, the problems that are becoming prevalent. So they have developed cobwebs around themselves, and there is not much they can do. When the cobweb snaps, that's the end of it. You can't rebuild it again. So the issue is that you have people who have reflected and have the knowledge, the know-how to be able to mentor others to continue from where they stop. There isn't any such thing, and things have the attitude and the principles and the commitment have changed, come drastically from what it used to be. I mean, you get an expatriate officer going on horseback, you know, from one village to the other. He's being paid for going even on a horseback more than 2 pence, 3 pence a mile or something like that. But he goes on the horseback and he comes back to write you the report about what he saw. And he sends it straight to Kaduna. Kaduna reacts. Before you know it, everybody is running helter-skelter to correct what has been discovered. You don't have it in the school system today.
That brings me back to the issue of policy. Is this also a function of multiplicity of policies, or is it more a question of somersaults in policy, or is it actually the lack of policy?
Well, it could be a combination of all these points you have raised. Could be a combination of this. And the question here is that how much of even the national policy of education are we pursuing? Or have we changed it to mainstream? If we have, what has replaced it? So that is the issue. Who is monitoring it to make sure that it is being implemented in the absence of a new one? Is being implemented to the letter. When you begin to talk about policy, you may probably have as many policies as you have states in this country.
Which in itself would be a problem, wouldn't it?
It is, of course it is. It is a problem.
Because that then affects standards.
Absolutely. Because then it will affect standards, because in the final analysis, it narrows down to going for WAEC. You see? Different policies leads to WAEC, sort of thing. But do you know also that most schools now, in primary schools, they don't even prepare children for primary 6 examination. They don't. They go into secondary school from primary 5. And it is being said also that schools are now being prepared to go to secondary school from primary 4.
That used to be reserved for exceedingly brilliant ones.
Well, I mean, I hope they are, but I don't believe so. But if you don't have your primary 6 certificate in an educational system such as the one we have in Nigeria, your education is incomplete. Absolutely. Because most of the manpower of pre-independence are products of primary 6, standard 6, middle 2. They are the people that held on this country for as long as we were before independence. They were all over the place because there were no secondary schools around to go to. There were no secondary school around to go to. So they stopped at middle 2. Some of them struggled to go through to middle 4, but majority were at middle 2. And they held on to this. The quality of their education was such that they could do the job very well. Go to mercantile houses, they are all middle 2 people. Go there and find out, they are all middle 2 people. With all due respect, my father finished his education much early, but he passed on only standard 7, they called it in those days. And there was nothing he didn't do. Nothing.
But then that brings us back to, if you were to say at this point, maybe 3 or 4 big things. Because again, without education, a lot of other things are now having issues. If, as you point out, there's problem, it will affect, and it is affecting other things. But before I even ask the question about what to do, I want to bring up the issue of brain drain. Many of those who would ordinarily have ended up in teaching, either because they have an affinity for it, they like it, they have a passion for it, or they have the intellectual capacity to pursue it, leave the country to go do it elsewhere. But because we produce so many, so it is said, they don't seem to care. There doesn't seem to be any concerted effort to keep more and more of these people back here. Further down the line, that's going to be another issue. If it isn't already, particularly at tertiary education level.
Well, one of the issues related to this question is that in general terms, I will say that Nigerians by nature seem to love themselves more than anything else. They love themselves, they like themselves, they like comfort, they like to live in luxury. And so they can sacrifice themselves by leaving one thing to the other, provided they will get the luxury they have there. You can hardly find, it's not common to find Nigerians making some sacrifices that will help Nigeria become Nigeria. So the option to that is get out and go and find, the green pasture that will make you live good. And in the process, you are creating a lot of vacuum behind you, and you don't care too much about that, because that is somebody else's problem. Now, if you therefore want to solve the problem, you have to have that patriotism, that patriotic feeling about your country that will make you accept that you are part of the system, and your input will also help in developing the system to make yourself comfortable there without going out. We don't have that. We don't seem to have that spirit at all. And when you find people going from one university to the other, I mean, with all due respect to those of them who are doing so, the interest is pecuniary more than service. The interest is pecuniary.
But
So-
they will argue in turn, Prof, that the system doesn't care either. That so if the system doesn't care, why should they care?
Well, well, one thing leads to the other. One thing leads to the other. Now it boils down to the type of leadership and the type of mentality we have with regards to what our education is supposed to produce. What our education is supposed to produce. If you want to be going from one place to the other, teaching the same thing, rightly or wrongly, and that is what is going to produce the quality of people, the qualitative people that would lead it, then we have something to worry about. But this shortage of teachers, quite all right, may be responsible for hopping and jumping from one place to the other. But I think essentially, as I said, is pecuniary, and the system himself has to be turned upside down in order to be able to know exactly why is this problem manifesting itself in such a strong way in the educational system of this country. There is a lot that needs to be done to uncover some of these problems, and we know what they are. We gloss over them and don't do anything about them because you don't want to disturb the apple cart, you know. So this is why we are continuously living with mediocrity in the system. You honor and you eulogize mediocrity. That is what we're having in the country now.
Something that has upset the apple cart generally, and now talking from the perspective of the students,
Yes,
is social media. Students used to be known for being studious, reading, researching, and so on. But because at the click of
Yes.
a phone now and so on, you can get virtually anything, some would say that's affected what would be a character trait of a student at any level of education. Is that true?
yeah. No interaction between student and teachers. The values of being educated is not being implanted. Somebody gave a lecture recently, and the topic of the lecture was the death of education. The death of education. It says that education in Nigeria has died. And he went around, this issue of social media was a factor. But he was also using that to show that you can use the social media to educate, you know, as against going to the classroom to teach. And in his opinion, education is dead. I mean, when you talk that education to an average Nigerian today and you say education is dead, what do you think his answer will be? The chances are that he will tell you, yes, it is, because of the status in which we are. So, when you use the social media, this personal interaction between teacher and pupils, which is very, very important in getting people to understand and empathize and sympathize and feel with you, is going to be missing. And that extra bit of knowledge, extra bit of important social interaction between the child and the teacher, or even between the mother and the daughter and the child, is missing because the attention has been diverted to social media. And you are talking to children, they are not listening, they are looking, they will always be grunting, but they are looking at that. They are not listening to you. They're just grunting to keep you quiet and not to disturb them from looking at something that is in the social media. So this is the problems of the times. What are we going to do? How are we going to capitalize the use of the social media and entrench it into the educational system? Can we do it? Will it pay off?
Are we even looking at that at all?
I don't think so. We're not. And if we are not, then we are gradually approaching the precipice, because it's neither here nor there. And so you get ill-educated people, not prepared for the society, and they are not prepared to contribute anything to the society.
Prof, correct me if I'm wrong. You're 88.
Yes. Who told you that?
It's my job to know. I say that because one looks at those in your generation and comes away with the view that you had it good, better than we're having it now. And so if you look ahead, what do you want to see for the country?
What do I want to see for the future? Well, a sound and educational system that will make you work independent of being a job seeker. The experience of today demands that we should move in that direction. Strengthen the primary school system, enhance it, and don't make primary schools necessarily. You can make it terminal to the extent of not wanting even to go to the secondary school. You've gotten enough to make you stand by yourself. And it has happened before. It has happened before. And so we want to make it self-sustainable, self-sufficient, and to increase and improve of our own reliability on ourselves. We want to rely on ourselves. We don't want to rely too much on others. We don't want to rely too much on government jobs because they are no longer there. We don't want to rely too much on our fathers and mothers because they're getting too old, they cannot work again. So you have to have an educational system that will sustain you. And you have to build the foundation from the primary school.
Prof, thank you very much for speaking
with us. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's Newsnight tonight. Thanks for being with us. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.